hello, and thank you for joining us. We're going to be doing something a little interesting. You're going to be actually doing a live coaching session with me. I'm Tom from Grassroots Motorsports, and we got Dion Von Moltke here from Racers 360. And you're going to kind of be showing me what happens when somebody gets some Racers 360 coaching and hopefully becomes a better driver, right?
Yeah, man, it'll be a good time. I appreciate you having us on. Excited to be joining you and everybody else from Grassroots Motorsports community. We're always big fans of everything you do. And yeah, I love coaching. I love helping drivers learn and go faster. So it'll be a fun time tonight. And looking forward to it.
Yeah, should be good. And should I talk a little bit about the car we're gonna be seeing video from? Or
yeah, absolutely.
You've won the Rolex 24 or something. You've run, I think, Sebring. You're a pretty experienced driver, so this car probably won't be too far out of your depth. It's a horrible $500 Miata and the 24 hours of lemons. So hopefully, it's kind of like a Daytona prototype, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Honestly, some of the most fun times I've had in a race car were at Lemons events, and actually, still, I've never forget taking our rental car Toyota Yaris out in a PCA event and passing some people in GT3 cars around Laguna Seca. It's fun.
Perfect. And we're going to be at Sebring. The video's from Sebring here, full course. So you ever run there before? You got any experience?
I've done a few 12 hours, won it a couple times. So I know the track a little bit. It's been a good track to me for sure.
Well, I'll give you some pointers because I've done 2 races there now. So
there we go. You'll be teaching me. It's funny, that track, any driver that's been able to drive for Alex Job Racing just seems to have good luck there. He's just got that place figured out. Awesome. And then if you got questions, make sure that you're asking questions. I'll try to get to those. Tom, maybe if you see them coming in as well.
I'm trying to, I wish I had a bigger screen here, but I'll keep an eye out.
Totally. So let me go and share my screen here. So we got Tom's video up. And so, most Racers 360 coaching sessions, you have onboard video. It doesn't need any fancy, cameras or data. You can see here, this is a simple GoPro. I think it's mounted either on the top of the car or the hood of the car. Is that right? I think
it right on the edge of the windshield, maybe something like that.
So
it's wherever our video guy could get it during a pit stop.
Exactly, right? So this is all we need. So typically the way it works for Racers 360, you can purchase sessions, you upload your video like this, we break it down, we analyze it, and we record a coaching session going turn by turn. And then we have some features like if you want to learn about racecraft, you can do a race analysis, or if you're looking for like a really in-depth mentorship, high touch point, we've got this amazing monthly plan where you get calls with your coach, you get monthly coaching sessions, you get drills to be working on in between coaching sessions. So a lot of cool stuff there as well. Awesome. Watkins Glen. Steve, that's probably my second favorite racetrack. For me, is Road Atlanta and then Watkins Glen. Awesome places. So a little bit different dynamic on this is what kind of different than what we normally do. So we've got Tom live with me so I can ask questions and do some things that I typically don't get to do. So Tom, love to, before I get into stuff and go through my notes, I'd love to hear from you. Like, what have you been struggling with, or where do you feel like you can improve, or do you have any thoughts on this session overall?
Sure. I've struggled with consistency. It's always tough to run the same lap twice. And I know that, a pro racer would go out there, find the fast line, and then run it over and over and over again. And, I can try a bunch of stuff and I can usually stumble onto the right line, but running it over and over again for an hour-long stint has always been tough for me.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And, I think one of the most challenging aspects about driving a race car quickly and finding consistency is that there's so many variables, right? Like you have not only the variables of how you're driving the race car, how you brake, when you pick up the throttle, how aggressively you pick up the throttle, but then you also have these variables of the track, the ambient temp, the track temps, the fuel load, the tire pressures, the tire temperatures, right? And all of that changes the grip a ton. So when I look at the challenge of finding consistency, in my experience, the kind of starting point is understanding what do I need to be focused on to build a foundation to build off of. So I'd love to know, like, when you're out there, do you have a pretty firm thought process of what are the things that really matter in each corner? What am I really focused on executing, be able to limit noises? Or are you kind of going out there and just trying to drive fast?
So I will constantly fall into kind of that trough of, I just got to drive fast. But lately I've been getting a little better at pulling myself back and going, okay, these are the points I need to hit around the track. Here's my braking point. Here's my apex. Here's my out. Mm-hmm. And if I focus, and I've been trying to get better at this, I can remember those points and turn a lap into hitting all of them instead of just driving fast. And that seems to make me faster, but it's definitely not muscle memory yet.
Got it. So here's what I'd love to work with you on. I think that's a super positive progression you're making there in starting to have reference points to build off of. And when you look at the fundamentals of driving a race car, and this is going to be helpful for speed and it's going to be helpful for consistency, there are sort of some core things that we want to start with. So first and foremost, I look at car placement, right? Like, am I placing the car in the right spot at the corners? You're doing an excellent job there. We're going to show you out. Like, we're going to go start playing this video here in a sec, but your car positioning is great, which leads me to say you probably are doing a really good job now at, okay, here's my braking reference point, my turn-in reference point, my apex reference point, my exit reference point. Like, you're starting to piece those together. Now, on top, once you get the car positioning right, there's the next layer of sort of base level fundamentals that we use as references. And those are going to be really two major things. One is a general braking trace. Am I getting to peak brake pressure relatively early in the brake zone, or am I getting to that peak brake pressure too late in the brake zone? The second is, where am I applying the initial throttle application? And it's that second piece of the puzzle that I'm going to be really, really focused in with you, because that's where I start to see that little bit of, I need to go faster. Let me just do this. And driving a race car is often counterintuitive. Does that, like, I know there's a lot there. Does that make sense?
No, that totally makes sense. So can I learn how to use the throttle correctly in a car with 100 horsepower?
100%. The physics of how to drive a race car don't change if you're in Formula One or driving a Miata. Now, there are some subtle things to where, and we're going to start to highlight, where if you're early to throttle in a car like yours, candidly, maybe it matters a little bit less than in a high horsepower car, but it still matters, right? It still matters. So what we want to focus on, right, is let me first focus on that first piece of the brake of the puzzle where we talked about the brake application. And what I'm really looking at, I'm going to turn the volume off of my headset here, is where do we get back up to peak brake pressure? Now, in a turn like turn one, you've got a really late brake zone, and it's also a corner that it's a relatively light brake zone in a car like yours, right? Because you're rolling in a
and especially with I'll shout out Nine Lives Racing here. We had way more downforce than chassis or power, so we basically just, as long as your foot gets near the brake pedal for a few feet, it was nearly flat through one.
Yeah, exactly, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn the volume up in my headset, and I'm going to pause it where I hear your initial throttle application come in. So no one else will hear this. This is going to be in my headset. Coming in, we're braking, coasting, and we're starting to feed the throttle in right now. So this is a relatively pretty good spot. But what's going on here, and the reason why this is so important is we have to understand, and I like to coach things as simply as possible. I don't like going into engineering things and going too far. But as a race car driver, there's a base level of physics that we have to understand. And essentially, what we do with our feet is what steers the car. So what does that actually mean? Essentially, every input we make in the race car transfers weight, and we ask the car for a certain amount of grip. So when you talk about when you're doing setup work, for instance, almost all setup changes come down to adjusting weight. How quickly it changes, how much it changes, when it changes. Like, everything you're doing is adjusting weight with setup changes. Mm-hmm. But everything that we do with our inputs, whether we brake, whether we throttle or we turn, it all adjusts weight transfer as well. So what's going on here, right? At this moment, we are still asking the car to turn, right? Like, your apex is still way out over there. Your hands are still like, come on, car, like, come on, turn. And if you wanted to roll in any more speed with the same technique, what would happen? I'm going to guess that your front end would understeer wide of that apex point. Do you feel like that's accurate?
Yeah.
Awesome. So the reason, let me back up. So essentially, with how you're driving the car right now, you're at the limit of the race car, right? Like there's no more front grip that car can provide you. I couldn't drive it any faster than you through this apex point because you're understeering wide of the apex already. And if we want to go faster, we have to really focus on the details of when we pick up the throttle. And as we start to build in this as a fundamental, we're going to be able to find more consistency with how much entry speed we start to roll in. So typically, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong here, the reason why most drivers pick up the throttle, the reason or the timing for where most drivers pick up the throttle is when they feel too slow. Like when your butt tells you, oh gosh, I'm too slow. Let's go. Do you feel like that's kind of where you are right now?
Yeah, it's got more to give. You might as well stab the throttle.
Got it. Awesome. So what ends up happening, right, is we just went through all of these like weight transfer, your feet and your hands. Like at this moment, you take weight off the front end, you're inducing that understeer. So now you've like artificially lowered the limit of the race car right now. Mm-hmm. You're the one inducing that understeer. Yes, you're at the limit, but that limit's now lower because of how you're adjusting. So there's all of these reasons why we don't want to pick up the throttle too early, right? So in an ideal world, I am coasting, and feeding the throttle in somewhere about here. And we can see we missed our apex a little bit here, right? Like I want to be super, super tight into this wall. So we're missing our apex by a little bit.
Yeah, we were telling all the other drivers, I want to see flat tires in turn one. That means you're doing it right.
Yeah, exactly, right? So how are we going to approach this in a better way? So we now have identified I'm just going to throttle when my butt tells me to. A better way to approach this is understanding really when we should pick up the throttle. And really in most corners, and what everyone's going to find out here is there's always exceptions to the rule in our lovely world of motorsports, right? And that's why coaching needs to be personalized. And that's why we focus so much on, one-to-one. Hey, what are you doing? What's your car situation? And all of this, right? And what's the corner, all of this type of stuff. But in most corners, 99% of the corners, I don't want to touch the throttle until I'm ready to start unwinding the steering wheel. In most corners, that means it's going to be the apex point. That happens to be the case here, right? And so the other part of this is when you look at it back in here, you're now asking the tires to do two different things. You're asking the tire to give you a lot of lateral load, a lateral grip. And now by getting the throttle, you're also asking the rear tire to give you longitudinal grip, like acceleration. Tires don't like to do two things at once. Like race cars really like to do one thing, accelerate or turn. So what I want you to focus on is building the foundation of where you attack the throttle. And then what we're going to do is you're going to start off doing everything else the same. You're going to brake at the same point. You're going to brake at the same level of pressure. You're going to come off the brakes in the same point. But now what's going to happen is you're going to get to here and where you normally get to throttle, and you're going to want to go to throttle. And you're like, nope, not allowed to. And it's going to feel painful, right? Because you're going to be there coasting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. I'm so slow. But what we're doing here is we're magnifying in on the issue, and we're going to force ourselves to fix the issue in the correct way. So by taking away that throttle as a Band-Aid to overslowing entries, it forces us to find another option. There's really two ways to solve an overslowing problem. One, going to throttle too early. We don't want that. The other is by focusing on the brake zone, right? So even though you mentioned you're braking late, you're braking light, you're still over braking the corner. Yeah, okay. And because you're over braking the corner, you're overslowing the corner, then you're early to throttle and you start to get into this routine.
All this stuff you're talking about also was making me think the tires would wear better if I drove like you.
Exactly, right? Because now you're just crushing the front tires, and then those go to hell because they go overheating. So there's a lot there, right? And what you're going to naturally start to think is, well, do I start to brake deeper? Do I start to brake lighter? My first thought there is going to be, as you start to really, once you start to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm an idiot, I feel really slow, but I know not to get to throttle, you're going to want to figure out, what do I do with the brakes? That's when I typically like to not worry about trying to trail brake perfectly down here. Like in a GT3 car, we're trail braking, we're coming off the brakes, we're coasting, and then we're feeding the throttle in here, right? I don't want a driver to go straight from going to throttle early to braking all the way down here. I want you to just get off the brakes and coast and roll speed as much as possible, right? And then feed the throttle in. And then you can start to work on carrying your brake zone deeper and deeper and deeper into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. That makes a ton of sense.
Awesome. So let's use that lesson for turn 3. So what I want to try and do in turn 3 here is I'm going to go slow motion, and using the thought there of I only want to apply the throttle when I start to unwind the steering wheel. I want you to tell me, like, in turn 3, where is the ideal place to get the throttle? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go slow motion and just tell me here, whatever you think is the right spot.
Sure.
Coming in, coming in.
How about here?
Boom. Rock solid. Right here is exactly where I want to do it. So what were you doing? I'm going to turn the volume back up in my headset. And let's pause.
I'm sure that was perfect. It's probably perfect.
Perfect, right?
Perfect. Yeah. Nothing to learn here.
So you're already on throttle back in here, right?
It was a slow car. Come on. I got to get my excuses list here. Where is it?
And that's how you know you're a race car driver. You got your excuses list ready to go, right? So now what's going to happen is you're going to be able to come off the brakes. You're going to be able to roll in 5, 10 miles an hour more, but eventually you'll be continue to slow the car down, So now I'm, going from 6 miles an hour more to 3 miles an hour more to 1 mile an hour more, but then I'm back to full throttle earlier than you as well.
And that would help with passing too in that corner.
Exactly.
Being able to have another 5 mile an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. You'll be able to brake deeper. You'll be able to roll in more speed. It's going to help you with traffic. It's going to help you everywhere. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's such a critical thing. And the interesting thing is, there's some things in racing where if you are, and for example, let me go down to turn 7. Turn 7 is a great example. Turn 7 at Sebring, if you miss the apex by a little bit here, like here, you miss it by a foot or two, right? Like y'all want to be down like, to be honest with you, it really doesn't matter. Like turn 7, you're actually doing a pretty good job. If I can roll an extra mile an hour or two and be relatively close, most times I'm better off. Like being perfect doesn't matter through there. But being perfect with where you pick up the initial throttle application really matters. Less so in a lower horsepower car, but for anyone in a higher horsepower car, it becomes especially important because we all know in a higher horsepower car, especially, if you have this much steering input in the car and you're trying to put the power down, that car's going to really snap oversteer with us. In a Miata, right? Like I can put my foot down on the floor, and that car is going to continue to turn for me. Now,
and this car was also loose, so I was using the throttle as a band-aid to keep the rear end planted, which is also probably not how a pro would do it.
No, exactly. So that's one of the problems, right? Is we see so often drivers starting to work on setup before they've got the fundamentals down. And now what ends up happening is you probably like if you were to hop in a car that was well set up doing this, you're going to go out there and be like, oh my gosh, it's understeering like crazy. I need to fix it. You start to fix it, but then you start to work with a coach or someone that can help you. But now the way you set up the car is all jacked up. So if you drive it correctly, it's got probably massive oversteer. So the problem is though, it's like, you've got to, there's a certain level of fundamentals that just apply no matter what you drive. And you might say like, well, in a Porsche 911 or in a Formula One car or in a Miata, the fundamentals are the fundamentals. The differences are maybe in a Miata, I'm applying the throttle here, and maybe in a Indy car, I'm applying the throttle here, right?
Yeah.
So there's small adjustments that I'm going to make, but for the great, big picture, it's all relatively the same, no matter what you drive, right? Because physics are physics. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. And
you should do this for a living. You're pretty good at the coaching thing.
Well, some people, not everyone thinks that, but hopefully I'm glad you're thinking that. So let me just go around the rest of the lap really quick here and talk a little bit about priorities. So into turn 5 here, let me turn the volume on a little. Actually, we don't need that. So into turn 5, let's talk a little bit about our priorities here. On this lap, we missed the apex by a little bit. And now this is a corner where it really does matter. So on this lap, I think our priority was a little bit too much on like, I got to go fast, let me roll speed. But look how we never really get down to that apex point. And what ends up happening, right, is now our car angle is, I'm going to exaggerate this, but you're looking a little bit too straight on.
Well, there's a reason there's no grass on the outside there.
Yes.
We're not the first ones to make that mistake.
Exactly. So this is a corner where maybe our eyes are a little bit low. If I were to saw kind of consistently missing an apex in turn 5, I would ask you, like, right now, if I back this up, do you know, like, typically where you're looking in this range right now?
I absolutely had low eyes every time I went through that corner. Towards the end, I was catching myself like, why do I keep staring at the ground here? And I think it was all the other cars going off, or because I dipped the wheel off so many times. I was too focused on that corner, and I should have been looking at the straight.
Yeah, and it's really easy, right? If there's one place around Sebring that you're going to get low eyes, it's going to be in this section, right? Because you're like 3, and then you're coming through, and then boom 4, and then boom 5. And I really want you looking for that. Like, I'm looking for the turning point for turn 5, but I want you really thinking about here is once I get the car heading towards where I want it to go, that's when I'm picking my eyes up to the next place for the most part.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for the turning point for turn 5. Right now, you've got it going, like you're heading for that turning point. This is where I'm starting to look for that apex point. And then what I'm doing is now I've got the car heading. I'm looking for the apex point. Right about now, my car trajectory should be heading for the apex point. That's when I pick the eyes up and look for the exit point. So it's not necessarily one step ahead of where the car is. It's really, you know, if you were to start looking for the exit point way back in here, you're going to start to miss your apexes because your eyes are too far forward. So it's kind of like get it pointed to where you want it to. Once you know where the car is going, boom, get those eyes up the next point.
Got it.
Awesome. So let me go into one thing that you did really, really well. And that's
I like this part. Perfect.
Right? This is the best part. So let me go here, 128. So one of the corners here that I see the most mistakes in a lower horsepower car is not adjusting to how much grip or what you need to do. So turn 10 at Sebring. Let me just play at full speed. We're coming in, we're braking, we're turning in. We have now 2 fast corners right in front of us in 11 and 12, right? So in most cars, you know, anything, let's say 300 horsepower or more, I'm going to have to sacrifice a little bit of speed, holding it, you know, further to the right to set up for 11 and 12 to be able to be as close to full throttle through 11 and 12 as possible, right? Because if I end up using all of the road out here, I can't be flat through an 11 and 12. What you did really well is you started realizing, wait a minute, in my car, I'm easy full throttle through 11 and 12. So I can use more track and I can roll more speed through turn 10 and not need to worry about sacrificing speed.
Right.
So great adjustment there. A lot of drivers get stuck in this, like, I know everyone else sacrifices speed, so I should be sacrificing speed too, if that makes sense.
So that means next time I go to Sebring, I'll bring the 350Z and put it into the tires there, right?
Hopefully you'll slowly, like, you'll start off a little bit more conservative and slowly work out more towards the Miata. So hopefully we can avoid that. Now, one thing I would like to see you work on, though, is right here. There's a great little indication here. What I want to do is kind of highlight here and here. When you look at the pavement here versus here, do you notice how the pavement here is like 5 shades lighter than the pavement shade out over here? It's a good indication if you're driving where they're like really the only other lines you see is people screwing up and no darkness. It might be an indication of where you don't want to be. So
you know, you paid for the whole track. You might as well get the part everybody else hasn't trampled.
you might want to drive on the clean section of the racetrack, because what's happening here is everyone else is going to the right and all of their rubber and clag and crap off their tires is going to where you are. Yeah. So now you can hold it to the inside, but you're driving in all the marbles and things like that. So I would like to have seen you just be a little bit wider and not driving through here.
Okay.
Awesome. So now the last major point, and hopefully I haven't given you too much information here. Please stop me if I have.
No, it's been great.
Awesome. So last point.
You're not even going to pause for passing an HHR? Come on. That
was an achievement, right? I mean, we can go back. Let's go back and highlight this beautiful thing right here. You don't often see a Miata passing anything on the straight line, let alone that. Yeah. So what I want to talk about is turn 16, which is one of the most crucial corners on the racetrack. So have you heard the saying, the first one back to throttle is the one that wins the race on the straightaway? Like, have you heard that saying before? Awesome. Mm-hmm. It's complete another bullcrap. Like, throw it out. Like, completely ignore it, right? So the real thing here is it's the first person back to full throttle after the apex point with as much speed as possible off the apex point. Way less sexy to say. But what ends up happening here is in turn 16, once again, what am I focused on? Where you pick up the throttle. I'm going to turn it up in my headset. Coming in, we're braking. Turn in, and you're back to throttle. Right? And this is what most drivers do, because you're taught, I'm on to a straightaway, I need to get back to throttle. Problem is, we just talked about all of those reasons you don't want to get back to throttle. You have understeer, and you can't get back to full throttle, and you're scrubbing speed, and all of this type of stuff. So what the truth is here is we're way overslowing turn 16. Now, turn 16 is a really interesting corner, right? It's not a corner where we're straight line braking. We're not coming in with a lot of speed. And it's not a corner that I can brake super deep into, right? Because I got to turn. And if I'm turning, I can't brake super deep. So what I want you thinking about in turn 16 is how do I brake as light as possible to roll in as much speed as possible? And really, it's in any sweeper type of corner like this, it's a bend. I'm really trying to transition this little amount of weight as possible to keep the car balanced. And it's a nice light brake zone. And we're really in turn 16, what I'm trying to do here, and what I think you could do it here is full throttle, light on the brakes, light on the brakes, light on the brakes, coast, feed the throttle and feed, back to full throttle. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Awesome. The last part is, you mentioned earlier, if you're paying for the racetrack, you got to use it.
Yeah.
Right? Notice how we don't use this exit curve really at all. You get like a half car with that over there. If I go show you turn 13, take a look at 13. Look at all that road you got out over there as well. Let's go take a look at turn 7 exit.
I will say, in my defense, I usually am a fan of dust clouds, but Lemon's rule book is if you dip one tire, you get a black flag. So I was being real conservative.
Okay, I didn't realize that, so that's fine.
Yeah.
As long as you have consciously decided what's going on there, I'm cool with that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, totally. But, I'm a big fan of dust clouds as well. And my favorite line always was Andy Lally was, what did he say? It was something like, smooth on the way in, cowboy on the way out, right? Like, hold on to that. Anything to get back to full throttle using all the road. So it always had that mentality. But yeah, the rule book's like that. That makes sense for sure. So do you have any questions on any of that?
Did I do 17 correctly? Because I've done that corner a million times and I've never felt good about it.
So here's on the notes on 17. Really good on the way in. Boom, braking, trajectory is great. Downshift, you're using all the road out over here. I typically like to get just inside of this white line here. There might be a little bit more entry speed you can roll in. But ultimately, first half of the corner looks great. Second half of the corner, mostly because that little bit of overslowing allows you to get a little bit closer to the inside here than I like. Now, 17 is one of those corners that there are more than one ways to take this corner. There are plenty of fast drivers that get all the way down to this wall as you come across this bridge. Personally, I don't like getting that close in because the bumps get worse there. So typically, I like having my right front tire just on the outside of this second yellow line and being a little bit more, not quite mid-track, but just a little bit wider as I come across under the bridge. So
that makes more sense.
Right? So you can see you're a little bit tighter in here than I'd like. I typically am like a half car with wider. It's a little bit smoother out there. I want to be able to apply full throttle here and let the car be wider. What I don't like as much is your exit. I don't like getting down to this grass apex here. Again, it gets bumpier. And really my whole goal on exits is I got my eyes up and I'm trying to unwind the steering wheel as much as possible, let the car be as free as possible. So a lot of drivers on exit try to use as little track as possible because it's less distance, right? Like you're going to drive.
Can you tell I was an autocrosser?
Is that what you're thinking through here on 17?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. I really could care less about driving an extra meter or two. What I care about is unwinding the steering wheel, letting the car be free. Because ultimately, right, if I could be wider now, it means I could be wider a little bit back in here. And if I can be wider back in here, it means I can be wider back in here. What does wider back in here mean? It means more speed. So I might be able to be a little bit more aggressive to throttle now, car taking me wider. And if I can be back to full throttle a little bit earlier than you, I'm going to carry an extra 2-3 miles an hour. If I drive an extra meter of track, that really doesn't matter, right? So I actually want to be all the way out close to this wall right about now. So I think this lap you're a little bit more to the inside than normal. Let me go to your first lap. Let's take a look at that. Give you a fair shot of this. So this lap we're going a little bit wider, right? That looks a little. Yeah. So, but I'm still more than a car width wider than you, right? I'm all the way out to this wall, and I actually have to steer right as the wall.
And honestly, I took the wide line there just to make the pass. I wasn't doing that regularly. Yeah.
Awesome. So there's a good indication here that you can be much more aggressive on corner exit. And it's tough to work up to, right? Because you see a wall and you're driving through a wall. It's hard to get, like, for me, every weekend I get back there, it takes me a few laps to get comfortable driving out there. But again, if we look at this, it's hard to really tell because it's concrete. But once again, your concrete's light and dirty. That concrete's dark and grippy.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. So while I know anyone in the audience here, Steve or anybody else have any questions on all that? I know, Steve, you probably heard a lot of this before. We've been working pretty closely together. But if we'd like to see here if there's any questions in the audience. And while they're thinking about things, Tom, do you have any other questions?
I'm trying to think back. Talk about a little bit about difference in braking strategy and braking points, endurance versus sprint racing, and how much does it actually matter with using up the car?
Yeah, so to be honest with you, that's a little bit dependent on the car. For example, in IMSA and GT3 cars, we're flat out. There's no difference at all from endurance to our sprint races. If the car's equipment just doesn't last, I might be less aggressive on the brakes, but my brake slope is always the same. So if we were to talk about like general braking slopes, and this is going to be true for most corners, not almost all of the corners. We're going to, boom, let me drop this down. Let me kind of draw data, right? So the generic, like the typical slope that I like to see in a braking trace is something that's relatively like this: peak brake pressure, reduce, and then we come down here. My chat's not hiding that, right? So, and let's say turn 16, like this would be a braking trace into a big hairpin type of corner, like turn 7. So how does that differ towards looking at turn 16, right? Turn 16, lighter brake zone. What does the slope of the line look like? Watch this. Relatively similar, right? Notice how the slopes are the same. I'm way less aggressive, but my peak brake pressure still comes early. So now in a car like yours, let's say, how would I take turn 17? Like, let's say the red line's not qualifying. What would I do in the race? It might be something like this. And then, I might change it a little bit to be a little bit less aggressive on equipment, but the slope still pretty much the same. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Yeah. We do have some other questions here now.
Yeah. Let's see here. Peter, right?
Yeah.
So Peter was asking, does this represent a typical coaching session? Yeah, this is pretty much like a one-lap analysis. So on what essentially happens when you come into Racers 360, Tom would have uploaded his video to me. He would have included notes like, I'm struggling with consistency. I'm struggling with that. I would have reviewed his notes, reviewed his videos, and I would have recorded a coaching session just like this, going through his video, drawing on the screen, stuff like that, and then sending it back to him. So the only difference here is that Tom's joined us live. Nice thing about Racers 360, all you have to do is upload something, you get something back, and you can follow up with your coach, making it really, really easy.
It makes for worse TV, but if I'd done the real Racers 360 experience, I would have thought about this ahead of time and been more intelligent on camera. So there you go.
Yeah, but no need to have, like, if you've got better cameras or data, great. But this is awesome. And then from Steve, let's see here. I haven't been to Sebring before, but the bump dynamic is something totally new to me. When figuring out ideal line through a corner, can you equate it to a small camber groove, or is it a totally different thing? So, Steve, what I'm going to try to do here is try to repeat that question back with how I understood it. And let me know if you just give me a yes. So what I think you're trying to ask here is, when you arrive at a racetrack that's really bumpy, like Sebring's notoriously the case, when I'm trying to navigate the bumps and find the fast line, is that relatively similar to attacking a corner that has some camber and finding the camber in that corner to find the ultimate grip. Is that sort of what you were thinking there with the question was? Give you a sec.
That's how I understood it anyway.
Okay. So I'm gonna answer that a little bit while we get back from him, hopefully. So the answer is kind of yes and kind of no. Yes. Let's see here from Steve. Whether the corner is with a small. Okay, got it. So yes, that was the question. That's a hard question to answer. The way I think about it is relatively similar, but there's some subtle differences. So if I were to relate, let's say turn 1 at Sebring to turn 6 at Road Atlanta. So turn 1 at Sebring, really bumpy, fast sweeping corner. Turn 6 at Road Atlanta, smooth but cambered, pretty fast corner as well. It's kind of off the top of my head the two closest corners I can come up with. So turn 6 at Road Atlanta, I see the camber. I know the camber's there. It's about me just kind of rolling in more and more speed until I start to feel the grip and how much grip I've got in that camber. It's more about trusting the camber, but you can really see it. In a corner like turn 1 at Sebring, it's harder to see the bumps. So it's harder to have that same, I know where the line is. It's more about, hey, let me go out there and drive what I first think is what the line should be, see what the bumps are doing, and then if the bumps are really upsetting the car, adjusting my driving based off of how the bumps upset the car. So if I were to use turn 17 as an example here, right? If I've got a really soft car and the bumps don't really upset something, I might be, boom, nice and tight in, back to aggressive throttle and driving over the bumps. But as the car, if I stiffen up the car and the bumps start to affect me more, what I'm going to start to feel is I'm going to try to drive the same line, but I'm going to get down here and all of a sudden, bam, bam, the car is jumping around here and I can't get back to throttle because of that. Well, now I'm going to react. Now I'm going to say, well, it's probably going to be faster for me to drive a less ideal line, but off of the bumps. So then I'm going to come in and be slightly wider and be like, hey, does that improve the drivability at all? If I can't avoid the bump at all, then I'm stuck with the fast line. But if I can avoid the bumps, and let's say I'm a car with wider and I'm smoother, I can get back to full throttle. Well, then I look at the stopwatch and say, hey, which one's faster? And sometimes just going over the bump and suffering through it is just faster. And sometimes driving around the bumps is faster. But it really depends on the car.
And sometimes you have to go through the corner 200 times in a row. So the repeatability of no bumps is better.
Totally true. Very, very true. Does that sort of answer your question, Steve? I've never thought about that before, but it's how I think about it now, at least. How about your thoughts, Tom? Would you disagree with that at all?
No, I'd say a good summary. It's funny, Sebring's kind of my home track. I live 15 minutes from Daytona, but I think I've way more time at Sebring. So I forget it has bumps. I forget that I'll go to Road Atlanta and be like, well, why is the car so smooth here? This is right, bumps. That's yes, right. So yeah, it's just, I kind of make a mental note about the real bad spots and, try not to hit them. And then every couple laps hit them and go, oh, right. Yeah. Mental note. I'm going to get a better brain here.
Yep. But, yeah. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I think we're good to go. Nice 30 minutes on the point. Hopefully not too much information.
Tell me about how to get some more coaching. How does Racers 360 work?
Totally. So if anyone's interested, you go to racers360.com and you create a free account on our dashboard. We have a dashboard that manages everything. So all of your relationship with your coach, all of your coaching sessions, everything lives in one place. And we're actually have a lot of really cool features coming out. So you sign up for your account, you click purchase. We have multiple different options there. If you want to send in a full race, if you want video and data, or if you just like a one lap analysis, just your video like you saw here, select your option. And then once you've purchased it, you can upload your video. You can either select from any of our coaches. We have an amazing team of coaches like Ricky Taylor from, ex-Penske Racing, now Wayne Taylor, Mike Skeen, Spencer Piggott, ex-IndyCar drivers, some amazing coaches there. You can select the coach you want, or you can let us select the coach for you based on what car you're in, what track you're in. And you upload that video, you submit it, you sit back and relax, and then our coaches review it. They record a coaching session and they add it to your dashboard. You can go back, rewatch that coaching session anytime. All of your coaching sessions live there. And again, if you have any questions, My email address, it's Dion, Dion, at racers360.com. Or if you go to contact us on our website, all of that goes directly to me. So anyone has questions about what we do, if you just have questions about racing or want to talk racing, I like talking racing. So reach out. We're here for you. And yeah, appreciate all the support from you and the team at Grassroots Motorsports.
Hey, always love working with you guys. Thanks a ton.
Of course. I hope everyone had a good day and hope everyone enjoyed it.
Support brands that support Grassroots Motorsports. Get your chemical solutions from CRC Industries. Visit crcindustries.com to learn more.